on the 3 C-SPAN television networks, C-SPAN Radio, and a video-rich website, cspan.org.
Next on this edition of Close Up, a discussion on the state of political media. We'll hear from former MSNBC host Tucker Carlson. He also takes questions from high school students of the Close Up Academy. It's an hour.
Hi, my name is Ricardo Fonseca from San Francisco, California. Welcome to Close Up at the Newseum.
Hello, my name is Tatiana Padilla, and today we'll be talking about the state of political media.
And I'm your host, Frank Bond. We're here in the night studio at the Newseum, located on Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., where each week we bring students face-to-face with current events, the workings of government, and of the press. Our students generate most of the questions and comments in the discussion. This week our audience consists of students from the Close Up Academy. Let's meet some of them right now. Hello and welcome to Close Up at the Newseum.
Hi, my name is Sarah Schmidt, and I'm from Sacred Heart School in Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
And tell us about your visit here with Close Up this week. First of all, is this your first visit to Washington, D.C.?
Yes, sir.
What was the highlight of your week since you've been here?
I'd have to say the highlight of my week would be meeting with some of our senators and one of our congressmen. It was nice to see the first-hand account of their views on the current issues.
Mm-hmm. And you're in the Gulf region, the Gulf Coast region, so you're still recovering from Katrina these many years later. Tell us about how the partnership between the federal government and state and local government still is impacting your life back home.
Well, definitely with oil, you know, after Katrina, gas prices went up, and also in Hattiesburg, there was an overflow of evacuees. So I guess you could say they've been helping with our school systems and stuff in that overflow.
We always hear about education issues, especially during the Bush administration with No Child Left Behind as one of those really critical areas where federal involvement impacts students at the high school level. How, with all those evacuees and with the general state of schools in Mississippi, do you feel that government has either helped or hindered your progress?
I'd have to say it's hindered our progress because some evacuees and other people have come from different education systems, and it's different for them to adjust to our systems.
Senior this year?
I'm a freshman, actually.
Oh, okay. So you've got college on the horizon. You can relax a little bit and enjoy high school. What's your favorite subject in high school?
Probably history.
Okay, very good. Well, welcome, and I hope to hear more from you as the program goes on today.
All right, thank you.
Very good. We're going to see if we can meet another student now. We've got students here from many cities across the country. Hello, welcome to Close Up at the Newseum.
Hi, I'm Courtney Foy from St. Mary's Dominican High School in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Very good. And once again, how are things post-Katrina in New Orleans in 2009?
I mean, we're getting there after 3 years. It's a little rough, and some places are better than others, but school is back, and most of our girls are still there, and we're just really excited to be back, and I couldn't wait to come back to school in my city.
I understand that you work for your school newspaper. Tell me some of the topics that have made headlines and really taken up a lot of space in your paper beyond the election, which I'm sure dominated the news last semester.
Oh, yes. Actually, one of our Dominican graduates is the new head of the EPA. So after this, we are going to meet her, and I'll be able to interview her that's the next headline coming up this week.
How cool is that?
Yeah, I'm very excited.
Have you thought about what you're going to ask her?
We have some questions, how she grew up in the 9th Ward, so how that affected where she went to school and what she wants to do with as being the new head of the EPA.
Now, what's that do for the sense of the girls at your school to know that one of your alum is now in the cabinet of the president?
It definitely gives me some confidence to think that, like, I can be up there one day and live in D.C. and do something for my city and represent my city so well, just as much as she can.
What year are you in?
I'm a senior.
And college next year?
Of course.
And have you heard yet, or do you have a short list?
I applied to 6 colleges. I've heard back from 4, still waiting from 2, so I'm still undecided.
Do you know what field you want to go in?
Either mass communications or sports entertainment management.
So you feel that there is a future in mass communications?
I hope
journalism?
so.
I mean, I hope so too, but it's going to be up to your generation, because right now that's kind of a dicey thing. And then, of course, your backup, sports management, looks like that will be around forever.
Of course, I hope so.
Very good. Thank you very much. We look forward to hearing more from you as the program goes on. Today we're going to be examining the state of the political media with our guest Tucker Carlson, who is a correspondent for MSNBC and also the co-host of the popular CNN program Crossfire. Tucker also authored Politicians, Partisans, and Parasites, My Adventures in Cable News. He currently holds the weekly chats in the Washington Post and is a commentator for the Daily Beast. Please welcome Tucker Carlson to our program. Before we begin to talk with Tucker and our students, our associate producer Daniel Pineda asked students if the media helped them stay informed. Let's see what they had to say.
Hi, this is Daniel. I'm here in the Newseum where we asked high school students, is the media giving you the information you need to be an informed citizen?
Well, I feel that ever since yellow journalism became such a profitable enterprise that sometimes it can be hard to learn the hard facts. I know that the media's job is to present us with information, but sometimes it seems I'm more informed about scandals than really, platforms and stances.
I think the media has done a superb job in informing us. I think that by using the internet I can learn a lot much faster than waiting for the 6 o'clock news, for example.
To be an informed citizen via the media, you really have to have a variety of intake. You can't just watch television like most Americans do and expect to get out the whole story. You need to read magazines, go on the internet, and just have a variety of sources.
It's citizens' responsibility also to use good judgment with what news that they're looking at.
Frank, there you have it. Back to you in the studio.
Thanks, Dan. You know, there's that word we hear over and over again in media. Tucker, let's get down to the case. You know, 10 years ago, we were talking about the 24-hour news cycle. Cable TV had really changed the face of how news and information was presented. Then the internet started to add interactivity to that, and lo and behold, now television is becoming more interactive than ever. How good is this? I mean, has it helped us become more informed, or has it made the landscape so confusing that we're struggling to keep up?
Well, it's good and bad, like everything. I mean, virtually everything's a mixed blessing. It's good in that people spend more time consuming news than they ever have. I don't think there's any question about that. The average person has access to more information than at any time in history by a factor of something high. I mean, truly, you can get primary documents, you can look at legislation online, you have just a variety of sources that was unimaginable 15 or 20 years ago. The bad news is narrowcasting. In other words, people can spend their entire lives hearing their own opinions repeated back to them. Conservatives can spend their entire waking day on conservative websites, liberals the same, and there's something bad about that. One of the things bad about it is it's good to be challenged. It's good to hear your own assumptions thrown back in your face once in a while, because it forces you to reassess why you think what you do, and increasingly people don't have to have that experience.
Earlier this week we heard that President Obama had the talk to the congressional Republicans, and one of the things he said to them is that you can't just listen to Rush Limbaugh and go and make your legislation. Now, was he baiting them, or was there a message? I mean, once again, we've gotten to the point where even talk radio and the bloggers, you know, have been elevated in terms of the political discourse among elected officials.
Right. Well, the president's a politician, and members of Congress are politicians, and he was making a political rhetorical point. Which is that if you're in the mainstream, you'll support my legislation. And that's a point that every president makes to every Congress, right? If you're a decent person and you care about our children, you'll vote for my program. So he wasn't saying anything different than any president would say. I don't think any member of Congress takes his cues from Rush Limbaugh. I don't think Democrats take their cues from the Daily Kos. I mean, these are pretty sophisticated people by and large. And most of the time, they're responding to constituent pressures. They're doing what they think the people who voted for them want them to do, not Rush Limbaugh.
And most importantly, Barack Obama understands that. And so, as you say, he's a politician, so he knows that but he was making a point.
Completely. He's a sophisticated guy.
And so we've got a new president, and as with most new presidents, here's a guy with a different style than we've ever seen before.
Yes.
Talk about what it takes for the press, for journalists to kind of read his style, to understand, so that they can be able to effectively report on what's going on.
Well, the thing that we admire most in the press is facility with words. If you're a good communicator, we love you. You can be, I mean, you don't have to be a Democrat or Republican, you can be from Satan's party. And if you can talk well, we love you. because that's what we do for a living. We use words, and we love language almost by definition. So inarticulate presidents always have a pretty rough time with the press. Articulate presidents, just the opposite. In the case of our current president, for a bunch of different reasons, and it's pretty complicated in my view, I don't think we've gotten to the bottom of who he is. We know he's very smart. We know he's wildly eloquent. We know that he reaches out to his opponents. Those are all admirable things. We don't know, in my view, what his core political beliefs are. Where will he draw the line? Where will he say, nope, this is what I believe, and I'm not moving from this point? What's his ideology? And we don't know. And I think, you know, you could say to me, well, 4 years now, Barack Obama was a pretty conservative president, or he's a pretty liberal president. Neither one would surprise me. I honestly don't know. And I've talked to Barack Obama. I covered this campaign for 2 years. And it's interesting that I don't know the answer to those questions.
What does it do to the patience of the press to have all these outlets and this constant churn to, you know, because it takes a bit of patience, relentless patience, to understand, to know that, now I get it.
Well, it's a disaster, actually, for most journalists. I mean, it used to be, I notice it a lot when I'm on the road during a presidential campaign. It used to be, I was always a magazine writer before I went into television, and the magazine guys would kind of get together for dinner after the day was done, you know, and talk about stuff, and then the newspaper guys would come, and the wire guys were still in their hotel rooms filing their stories. Now, everybody's in his hotel room filing a story, because everybody has a constant sort of pressure on them to produce, you know, stories for the website. And so it's made the business much more frenetic, much more frantic. And that's good in some ways and bad in others, and it's bad in this way. There's almost no time to reflect upon what anything means. So you're thrown something by a campaign, you know, boom, this happened, breaking news, you know, put it up. And you don't have a chance to think, well, wait a second, maybe they're spinning me, maybe this isn't that significant, maybe it's more significant than they're giving it credit for being. You just don't have time to think.
Let's go to a student. Hello, welcome to Close Up at the Museum.
Hi, my name's Cara McLaughlin from San Francisco, California. I was wondering, do you think the 2008 presidential election would have played out differently at all without media's portrayal of certain candidates, particularly with youth?
Oh, of course not. I mean, that's a great question. And no, the press controls the process to a large extent. In the end, voters decide who becomes president, but voters' perceptions of candidates is shaped and controlled by the press. And so we have an enormous amount of power. We pretend we don't because it sounds kind of creepy. You know what I mean? But we do, actually. We have almost absolute power in political campaigns. And the press was for Barack Obama, obviously. I think Obama's talented. Bush was gravely unpopular. There are a lot of factors that allowed the current president to become president. But one of them, doubtless, was the fact that the press was foursquare behind him. I don't know a journalist who didn't vote for Barack Obama. And we all sort of touted him on television and in print. So, yeah, the press played a big role in this election.
Where did you follow primarily the campaign and the election?
A lot of my information I got online and from my parents and at school and newspapers, I guess. But I also guess I could have been influenced by, like, Tina Fey on Saturday Night Live and things like that that can really affect like students that maybe aren't as educated about the election.
And Tucker, talk about that a little bit, because this is one of these subjects that won't go away. And I can remember when you had Jon Stewart on Crossfire, and this was a couple of years ago, and his trump card was, I'm a comedian, not a journalist. But,
right.
But it has proliferated, and there are people who understand that you've got to understand the politics to get the humor. So what role has political satire on television, on the internet, you know, ever played in the shaping of the elected officials that we have in office?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would argue that Stewart's line wasn't a trump card so much as a dodge and a way to avoid the truth, which is, if you're Jon Stewart and you have these high ratings and a following, you are a player in the process, and what you say has consequences. And if you suck up to certain politicians, as he does, and mock others, you know, it has an effect on the way people vote. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying it's important to tell the truth and acknowledge it. You're a very honest person for admitting that Tina Fey affected the way you see politics. I think a lot of people had this exact same experience. You know, these narratives are formed, and almost all of them are rooted in truth, to be honest with you. You know, that certain, Bill Clinton, all he cares about is women, you know, or George W. Bush, he's a moron. You know, all these sort of portrayals, comedic portrayals of candidates are all sort of true. And that's why they're effective and powerful, but they don't come close to telling the whole story. I mean, Bill Clinton was about a lot more than Monica Lewinsky. George W. Bush went to Harvard. He wasn't that stupid,
Yale.
right? So
Yale.
He went to Yale, then Harvard.
Yale, then Harvard. Okay.
Right. So it's more complicated than that. But I think you're absolutely right. There are a lot of people whose opinion was shaped by that portrayal of Sarah Palin.
And let's ask our entire studio audience, just by show of hands, how many of you typically watch The Daily Show, The Colbert Report, and the Saturday Night Live Weekend News Update? You know, we have that there. And Tucker, we've gotten to the point now where the elected officials themselves will go to those programs. I mean, it's a must-stop.
Well, of course, you go to where the votes are. Politics is actually pretty simple. It's the process of convincing people to vote for you, and so there aren't too many principles in that, right? It's just, you know, where if, you know, people are hanging around a bordello, you go to the bordello. I mean, it's like, it doesn't matter, you know, you go to where they are. I'm not offended by it. I just think it's important to call it what it is, and to be honest about it, and to concede that comedians are having an effect on who we choose as president.
Okay, let's go to another student. Hello, welcome to Close Up at the Museum.
Hi, I'm Natalie Ballou, and I'm from San Francisco, California as well at St. Ignatius College Prep. And I was wondering if you thought it was appropriate for the media to talk about family members of candidates during the election.
Before you tackle that, what do you think about that as a news consumer?
I don't think it was appropriate because you can't choose your family, and I don't think that they chose to be in the spotlight of the media.
Well, I agree with you. I was also born in San Francisco, and great city. I agree with you completely. I think it's awful. There are times when you can't help it. I mean, at one point, Jimmy Carter's brother, Billy, you know, entered into a contract, a financial contract with a hostile foreign government using his brother's influence. Okay, that's a story. There's nothing you can do about it. But most of the time, leave the family members alone. I mean, many times in covering candidates, I've been offered interviews with the spouse. And 100% of the times I turn it down. Because I think it's intrusive, I think it's unattractive. Candidates, by the way, pimp out their families. They do. They do, I'm sorry, they do. I've seen it. I know. This is not speculation. It's been done to me. Well, would you like to, you know, we've got an amazing story about the kids. I don't want to hear about your kids. You know what I mean? I want to hear about you. And so they are complicit in that, and don't let them lie about it and say they're not, because they are. But I still think we ought to be above it. We shouldn't take the bait. We should say, no, I'm sorry. You know, we're not going to do the photo shoot on your kids, or we're not going to do the piece about your wife's breast cancer or whatever. We're just going to, you know what I mean? We're just going to leave it alone. That's my opinion.
And in that same vein, can we go back to this use of the term media? Because you're absolutely right. The politicians themselves will go to Entertainment Tonight.
Yeah.
They will go to Jon Stewart. They're going to get a softer kind of a shaping there. Is it or to what extent is it incumbent on the voters to really differentiate between where you're getting your information, the quality of the information, and how you stack it?
You said it right there. I mean, you know, voters have to make all sorts of different judgments and be discerning in how they, you know, process news, and I think most people kind of get that. The one thing that irritates the hell out of me is the fact that entertainment shows like Jon Stewart or The Tonight Show which aren't, I'm not attacking the shows themselves, but they are used by politicians because they're an easier venue. If you're John Kerry and you go on Jon Stewart's going to ask questions like, you know, why are you so wonderful, or why are people so mean to you? You know what I mean? You get a pass. And there's something dishonest about that whole thing. I mean, come on a show where you're asked real questions by adults who are going to hold you to your previous statements, or ask follow-up questions, or, you know, elicit from you information that voters need in order to decide whether to vote for you or not. Instead, they go on these entertainment shows and get these puffy questions. You know, it bothers those of us who ask mean questions.
Yeah. Thank you. Maybe we'll hear more from you. Right now, we have a segment where young voices from all over the country can participate in our discussion via YouTube. So now let's go to our YouTube question.
This is Justin Rublo from American University. As you know, over the past few years, the internet has grown as a news source, and I was wondering how you thought the traditional media would respond to an increasing reliance on the internet for news.
Number one, underlying question, is there an increasing reliance on the internet for news? And number two, how have traditional media been responding?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's the understand. Yeah. You know, people under 30 get their news from the internet. I get my news from the internet. I get 5 papers at home every day, but I still go online first thing upon waking. So yeah, I mean, the future is really obvious. It's online. And it's great, by the way. There's just so much more information available that if you're interested in the news and what's going on in the world, it's a wonderful advancement in our society, in our culture. Here are the 2 problems with it. One, you can't make any money if you're a news organization off the internet. Someday someone will figure out how to get rich from putting news on the internet. No one has. Why is that bad? Because news organizations are going out of business. And blogging is great, bloggers are great, but the truth is they don't report anything. They just chew over reporting that other people did, that newspaper reporters did. Once those newspaper reporters go away, none of us is going to have any idea what's going on in the world, and that's really, really bad. The second pernicious effect of the internet on news organizations is they have pushed the mainstream media, particularly cable television, to the extremes. So reporting is really expensive, it's really hard, it just costs a lot of money. It takes a lot of time to report the news. It's a lot cheaper to get people up there yelling at each other. And the internet has put pressure on us in the mainstream media to such an extent that it's like, why would you want to send a reporter to go cover a war when you could just hire some guy to like spout off about it? It's depressing.
Well, I tell you what, during our program, we're going to poll students from the Close-Up Academy, get their reaction to some of the issues being raised in the program. And our first poll question, and once again, we're looking for a show of hands. What types of news programs do you prefer to watch? Our first choice, news and information. And we're going to do this by show of hands. So those of you who prefer to watch news and information, if you can give us a hand raise. And the other choice is panel discussions and debates. And it's almost evenly split, and I'm not sure. There's subtle differences between those two. Let's go to one of our students at the microphone. Maybe you can tell us what your preference is and why.
Hi, my name is Margaret Thomas. I'm from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and I prefer news and information. The reason is because I like to hear information about my world and get all of the events going on and not listen to people argue.
Okay, well, and this is what we were talking about, Clucker. Now it's very interesting in terms of what constitutes information on news and information programs. How are we stacking up on that? Is there too much filler?
Oh, there's way too much filler. And look, I mean, I made a living as the filler, right? I've been on a lot of opinion shows and hosted a bunch of them, and I'm not arguing against them. I think they have a place. They have an honorable place in the same sense that a newspaper has an op-ed page and an editorial page, and they're great. You wouldn't want a newspaper that only consisted of op-ed pages, however. That would not be a filling meal. That would just be dessert. And increasingly, I think, because it is cheaper to produce opinion than news, we're moving in that direction.
Let's find out from a student that feels otherwise. Hello.
Hi, my name is Zenaida Barr, and I'm from San Francisco, California.
And what do you prefer in your news viewing?
I feel that debating and panels are more important because you have real facts, and it's like you get to prove your point instead of people just, well, this is what happened and that's what happened. It's not more of what happened, it's more what are you going to do about it.
And tell me this, who do you prefer to see in those debates and on those panels? Are you looking for pundits? Are you looking for journalists? Are you looking for elected officials who are accountable?
I think that everybody has different point of views, so I would prefer not to just put myself in that certain position. Like, I want to hear what everybody has to say.
Tucker, talk to us a little bit more about how these programs are made up. You touched on it a little bit about people like to see the argument, but so much of the quality of a program starts with who you choose to put a microphone on.
Well, that's exactly right. And I mean, there are a lot of problems. I mean, I did this for 10 years. I can tell you there are a lot of problems with the way some of these shows are produced. And one of the main ones is getting phony guests on. So, let's say I'm a screaming liberal host and I want to attack conservatives. I'll get, a member of the Klan on. And the truth is, there is no Klan in the United States. It's 8 retarded guys in Alabama or what, you know what I mean? They don't represent anybody. You know what I mean? But well, it's true. So I'll get the Klan guy on and be like, that's wrong, that's just wrong. It's like, who disagrees with that? It's a straw man, it's phony. Get a responsible, articulate, intelligent adult. Get your peer to debate you. Do you have the stones to do it? Are you brave enough to do that? Most people aren't. And I have no respect for hosts who put ludicrous guests like that on. My rule always was, I want someone who can actually explain the other side. I think that's fair.
Bringing something to the debate.
Exactly, and not just sitting there as a vehicle for me to show what a great person I am.
Right, very good. Let's go to another student. Hello, welcome to Close Up at the Museum.
I'm Stephen Ewing from Sacred Heart High School in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. This goes back to the YouTube thing. With ways to get on YouTube now, like with the new phones like the iPhone, the iPod Touch, everything like that, where you can get on YouTube from the palm of your hand. Do you think videos such as this video called Shift Happens and these pretty much subscription people that just talk about like the election and everything like that, do you think that really plays a big effect on voters, young and old?
Well, certainly young. I mean, you know, we don't know, obviously, and since you are young, I'm sure you're aware of this, this technology is moving to handheld devices. So, I mean, because of advancements in technology, we can sort of see in 10 years, you're not going to have some massive computer. You know, you're going to get a lot of this on your phone or your PDA. But it hasn't happened yet, so we don't know exactly what the effects are. It will change our society. It will change the way we relate to each other, and it will change the way we disseminate news. I think it will probably make dissemination of news even faster. And there are some downsides. I mean, one thing that anybody who uses a computer should be aware of is that anything you send by email, whether it's an email to your mom or naked pictures of yourself, it never goes away. I'm serious. I'm not kidding. It never goes away. And I think maybe people under 30 don't have a sophisticated appreciation of that. They're like, oh, it just kind of is out there. Right. Yeah, no, it doesn't. And then you will get older, and it could come back to haunt you. So think twice before you send something that you wouldn't want your mom to see. That's my strong advice to you.
You know, it's interesting. We're talking about media, and we talk about the expectation and the acceptance by the politicians, by the broadcasters. I want to ask you, and then I want to ask you to comment on this. The change that has always come in America comes from the people. It doesn't come from Washington. It comes from the people, and then they reflect that. So how have these mobile devices and the viral videos changed your expectation of what from the media and your acceptance of what you see there?
Well, like that's honestly a difficult question, but now that you can get on the internet, like pretty much anywhere in the world, mainly that. News is a whole lot faster now. There's always a rush to get news. There's always a rush to put news on there. And after a while, it just starts getting repetitive. And now these news organizations are just putting out stories, like these just little stories like Barack Obama got his children interviewed by somebody without his wife's permission. Honestly, I just don't think that little stories like that should matter in an election.
Yeah. And Tucker, interesting, talking about it from the broadcaster standpoint, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that gets on the air because we can put it on the air, but there's also the opportunity when actual news happens, rarely is there a journalist there. We saw in the China earthquake that there were things happening that the Chinese government didn't want to get out, but because people had these digital assets, it was on the news, and the Chinese government had to respond to that.
Yes.
So that there is that learning curve of how we use these assets, and it's going on both on the broadcasters and on the part of the news consumers.
It's fantastic. I mean, there are just many more potential sources of information than there have ever been, particularly sources of visual information, pictures and video. I mean, it used to be, you know, when my father was in television news, you had to go, you know, get the film and develop it and splice it together and get, you know, you had this massive staff, and none of that is true anymore, and that's a great thing. The one problem with all of these new platforms for news is that in the aggregate, they give the impression that something is always happening and that we need to keep abreast of it. And it's like, it's breaking news, oh my gosh. And it becomes addictive, frankly. It does. And the truth is, turn that crap off and go talk to somebody. Like, go have lunch with a friend. Have a human conversation once in a while. You know, you feel like this is a society, like, totally sitting in front of, you know, each person has his own screen and he's like totally in his own world and chatting with his friends on Facebook. It's like, I don't know, you can kind of see how it could become a nation of morons pretty soon. You know what I mean?
And it also, we want you to react. It also devalues and makes more opaque those stories that don't have a readily recognizable visual element like finance.
Bingo. That is such a smart point. There's this, the House just passed this massive $1 trillion, I don't know what it is, recovery, stimulus, bailout, I don't know what we're calling it, but this massive spending bill was just passed by Democrats in the House that is going to have ramifications for every single one of you for the rest of your lives. I'll give you $1,000 if you can tell me anything about it beyond, you know, the basic headlines. No one can. And that is, it's really a failure on our part in the press, I think.
It's interesting, and it's not easy, but one of my pet peeves is, you notice when you watch network television, whenever they talk about the Fed, you will see a picture of a building that's right down the street on Constitution Avenue.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure what that means, but that's what you'll see. And then they'll go in tight on the eagle above the door.
Yeah.
And they'll be talking about dollars and cents and mechanisms, and but what you're seeing is this white marble building.
Yeah, what is the Fed?
Yeah, right. Okay.
Does anybody know what the Federal Reserve is? You do? I'm impressed. You're in a very tiny minority in this nation of 305 million people, trust me.
Let's go to another student. Hello, welcome to Close Up at the Museum.
Hi, I'm Alex Martin. I'm from Sacred Heart School in Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
What is your comment?
I have a question regarding age groups. During like elections or any time on the media, what age group should the media focus on? Like younger voters or older voters who have been voting for a while?
Well, older people vote. I mean, it's hard to know who the press ought to be. I mean, look, we focus on certain demographics not because they vote or don't vote, but because they buy shampoo, right? So we want younger viewers, 18 to 40 roughly, because they buy products and because their buying habits are subject to change. It's a complicated theory about which people are most valuable to advertisers. But the bottom line is we want to reach young voters because we make more money when we do. A show that has relatively few viewers, but if all those viewers are young people, you can make a ton of money on that show. A show with a lot of viewers, all of whom are old, makes less money. It's unfair, but that's the way the television business works. The truth is young people don't vote very much. They did in slightly higher proportion this year because it was Barack Obama. Jesus has come to earth, but typically they don't. But they still didn't vote at the rate that old people vote. People over 65 vote, and they also understand what they're voting for. I don't know what that means. I'm not going to offer commentary on it, but those are the facts.
Thank you. If you're just joining us, you're watching Close Up at the Museum. We're discussing the state of political media with our guest, Tucker Carlson. If you want more information about the Close Up Foundation or the museum, please visit our websites. That's closeup.org, also newseum.org. Tucker, we've just been talking about who the broadcasters are trying to reach. How do you see network news evolving into some, once again, viable vehicle for passing on news and information that's economically viable and that people watch, that's not getting declining viewership?
Boy, if I could answer that question, I'd be the head of CBS. I don't know what the answer is. I think people's habits change, family culture changes, and family life changes, and it's just not. It's not in people's patterns of daily life to gather around the television at 6 p.m. or 6:30 and watch nightly news. The viewership, and I have a lot of friends in nightly news, and a very good friend of mine runs one of the shows, one of the nightly news programs. But I don't see much of a future for it. I hope I'm wrong.
All right. Katie Couric was on in prime time last night. Is this a possibility? The CBS Evening News in a primetime newscast?
I think it's
first ever.
I'll tell you what network, and her producer is my friend Rick Kaplan, my former boss at CNN and MSNBC, great guy. And I wish them well. I really hope they succeed. I think that is the future of network news. What's the advantage they have? Obviously, cable is faster. It's always on. It's got more pretty colors. You know what I mean? They can't compete with cable in certain ways. They can go much deeper than cable, though. That's, turn the nightly news into a kind of news magazine, a nightly half-hour news magazine that gives you 3 stories but in-depth, put it in prime time. I think that might work.
It's worth a try. Our next poll question is simply, where do you get most of your news? We have 4 choices, and we're going to put them on. The first is 24-hour cable news networks. That's your group. We're going to ask you to do a show of hands. We've got your choices up here. Broadcast news, the internet, or newspapers and magazines. So let's go by show of hands first. 24-hour cable news networks is your primary source of news, and we've got a few. And then the network news broadcasts on NBC, CBS, ABC, and Fox, or newspapers and magazines. I left out the internet. The internet gets most of the votes. Why am I not surprised? Introduce yourself and tell us what your choice is and why.
Hi there, my name is Will Aspelin. I'm from San Francisco, California at Abraham Lincoln High School. Personally, I watch 24-hour cable news networks. They're just more interesting. And I'm a really busy guy. Just can't watch 6 o'clock news. It's just a very slow pace. It doesn't have the personalities that cable news does.
Right. And how often and how many times a day do you check in with your cable news source?
Probably once a day.
What do you watch?
CNN, MSNBC, occasionally Fox News.
And do you surf them, or are there specific shows that each offer that you try to see?
No, I just surf them. I mean, you get a more in-depth, you get stories that you normally wouldn't hear on the national news.
Okay, let's hear from another student that has another choice. If we can get our next student up here to the microphone.
Let me just say, I'm amazed that Fox is legal in San Francisco. I would have the city council had figured out a way to ban it.
Hello, welcome to Close Up at the Museum.
Thank you. My name is Margaret Trainer. I'm from San Francisco, California, and I go to St. Ignatius. And I trust newspapers and magazines for my news. And I think that just they have this, the fact that they've been around for a long period of time gives them a veneer of trustworthiness. And also, I like knowing that a lot of research and work goes into each article, and that there's always editors on hand if, information is not correct.
Now let me ask the Katie Couric, Sarah Palin question. How many newspapers do you read and which ones? Or magazines? Give me a sampling, because you said you like to read newspapers and magazines. So do you actually, go to a couple of different newspapers, a couple of different magazines regularly?
Well, at my house we get a couple of newspapers delivered, like the San Francisco Chronicle and I think the New York Times. And, my parents are always leaving them around the house, so I just kind of pick them up and go. Magazines, I mostly read fashion magazines, I'm not going to lie. But I also, occasionally I'll pick up Time or something if there's an interesting article in there.
And when you're reading these newspapers, are you aware of the different points of view of the publication, whether it's more conservative or more liberal, so that you have a variety of opinion that you're getting?
Well, yeah, I think it's pretty obvious when you're reading an article what their kind of background or bias really is. But I think that the good thing about written news is that I think they do a better job of presenting both sides of the argument and all the information, like a fuller spectrum. Whereas I think a lot of, networks, it's really obvious kind of what side they're on. So.
Okay. Thank you. And Tucker, as our next student comes up, going back to reading news to inform yourself or reading news to validate what you already believe, how are our habits as a culture these days?
Well, they're changing as they migrate from print, newsprint to the internet. I would say I just want to affirm and agree with what we just heard. I think that print is a better medium for conveying information. You can get more in print. It's less emotional. There's less demagoguery in print. Television, someone can always jump up and say, "What about the children?" and start crying, and you're like, "Oh, yes, that's right." Print, you sort of have to think it through, and also, frankly, having grown up in this business and worked in both print and television, I'll be totally blunt with you, there are actually kind of smarter people in print, by and large. Writing an article is really hard. Most people can't do it. Most TV people couldn't do it, that's for sure. And, there's smart people in television, but generally, no, there's pretty smart people in print, I think.
Got to convey your ideas through the language, which is what you began with.
It's hard,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah, very good. Hello, welcome to Close Up at the Museum.
Hi, I'm Jordan Flynn. I'm from Brentwood, California. And I prefer using the internet to get my information just because there's so many different ways you can get it. You can find a specific subject that you're interested in, and you'll find opinions from across the board on it.
Do you go to news sources? Like, where do you surf? Where do you find yourself most often when you get on the internet looking for news of the day?
I normally go to drudgereport.com just because it allows me to go to, it gives me information that I actually care about, and I can find stuff that I want to read about.
And then you use their links to go to the full story and the news publications?
Yeah.
And Tucker, how about this? Once again, going back to the choices that we make as news consumers, is it taking a lot on yourself to go to that place that you trust is going to be an aggregate of stuff, which is different than a newspaper being an aggregate of news?
Right.
And then feeling that you walk away, okay, I'm informed now.
Well, I read the Drudge Report, 20 times a day, so I'm with this man. But I also read the New York Times. I read the Huffington Post. A little overbearing, the Huffington Post, with their stupid opinions in the left column. Who cares? But they have some good stories there. I like aggregators, actually, because you can't really mislead someone with an aggregator. It's like, here are the stories that we think are interesting, and you can see if you find any of them interesting. People huff and puff about, oh, they're biased, whatever. I don't know. They're no more biased than the stories to which they link. So I think they're very useful. I think we could actually use more of them.
Okay. Let's go to another student. You look familiar.
Yes, sir.
Coming back for more. You ready?
Always, yeah.
All right.
This is about cable news. Pretty much in my house, it's always on cable news. Like we have the TV in the living room. My parents love it. It really helps a lot that cable news is usually more popular and easier to get from like I said, like with the iPhone and iTouch and everything like that. You can get it at the touch of a button. And also, they usually have more people on there with different points of view. That makes it more unbiased, and which every news station is a little biased. But it's more interesting to watch.
I find there are few where there is a less diversity of views than there used to be in cable news. I mean, when I first started in the mid-'90s, you would have shows where you'd have one person from one side, another from another side, and they would debate each other. That's not there aren't any of those shows left, so far as I know, at least that I'm aware of. Now the model is the sort of Big Brother talking head looking into the screen and saying, that's the way it is, and if you disagree with me, you're evil. There isn't as much balance, I don't think, and networks, MSNBC's a liberal network, Fox conservative network, CNN's a liberal network. I mean, it's like networks have a kind of ideological identity, and then people who agree with them watch it, so they don't want to offend those viewers by putting someone on who doesn't agree with them. I don't know. It's a bad trend, I think.
Talk to us a little bit, Tucker, about, because it's really interesting how a news story enters the news stream. Sometimes it's through Drudge Report or some other website where the news organization says, well, maybe we don't have everything nailed down. And then the way the 24-hour news operations can keep a story alive while it develops.
Well, television networks don't typically report the news. They repeat it. The news is gathered by lowly newspaper reporters who make like $70,000 a year and have no health insurance and basically have really difficult, unpleasant lives. They do all the work for the rest of us who make much more than that. It's very unfair, deeply unfair. But that's the way it is. In television, we get, I would say, 80% of our news from the Drudge Report. And we sort of scan it every morning and look at the stories he thinks are interesting, and then you get on a conference call at 9 in the morning, and what do you think is interesting? What do you think? Well, Drudge got this, and the New York Times is another big source. You got this, and let's round up some experts and do a show on that. That's kind of the ugly truth about how these shows are made.
And then when you get to local news, it's often the strongest local newspaper illustrated in the evening.
That's at best. I mean, local news, I like local news, but most of it is just such garbage. Ugh. It's all about teasing you on the weather, because the weather is the one thing that's actually local. Weather and local sports. They don't do much local news. It's like, they have the weatherman on in the first 4 minutes, and it's like, whoa, big news tomorrow, isn't it right, Eddie? And he's like, yeah, we'll tell you later in the show. And you're like, oh, I want to go to bed, but I can't. They're teasing this weather ludicrousness. It's all about the weather and local news.
Okay. Let's go to another student. Hello, welcome to Close Up at the Museum.
Hi, thanks. My name's Jackie. I'm from San Francisco. I go to St. Ignatius. And I was just wondering, you had mentioned earlier how the press sort of favored Obama throughout the election. And I was just wondering how much you thought that was due to his increased spending, or if that's just because he's sort of an icon for the younger generation.
I guess when I said favored, I really meant passionately in love with. Slobbering over. And not just normal love. Like, I love the Giants, or the Red Sox. That's a kind of platonic love. But I mean a kind of love, like red in the face. Like you have to be a 14-year-old boy to understand. Like, passionate love for Obama. I don't think it had to do necessarily with his spending. It had to do with a bunch of things. It had to do with he seemed cooler than any other candidate. He probably was cooler than, he was cooler than any other candidate. He's smooth. He's wildly eloquent. He's young. He's new. We love new. He's black. That's unusual and cool. He's not Bush. I mean, there are a bunch of different reasons. No, truly, there are a bunch of reasons that the press favored Obama. And, of course, 99% of journalists are Democrats. So that played a role in it, too. But it wasn't just ideological, because they hated Hillary Clinton. Most journalists sort of agree with her politics, but hated her and were mean to her. But they just liked him.
How much of it was an admiration that he seemed to run his own campaign, and even after he got the nomination, he didn't give himself over to the Democratic Party to run his campaign. He continued to run his own campaign.
Well, I think look, he ran a great campaign, and we who cover campaigns admire skill in politics. I'm not sure that we should, but we do. I know that I do. I looked at that campaign, I was like, wow, that's a smart campaign. I admire that. The problem is that that's not, sucking up to people in power is not our job. It's the opposite of our job. So even if we think someone's cool or we vote for him, you still have to ask him hard questions. I mean, a friend of mine, I'll just give you a very quick example. A friend of mine named Jonathan Martin, who's definitely one of the best campaign reporters in the United States. The other day, Obama comes down to the White House briefing room at the White House, and he's wandering through, and all these reporters are like, "Oh, you're so wonderful, I voted for you," and literally, you know, "Can I get my picture with you?" It was like, made you want to throw up. My friend Martin, who's an actual real reporter, I don't even know what his politics are, he's non-ideological, he goes, "Mr. President, you know, what about this? Let me just ask you like a real question." And Obama goes, "Huh? How dare you ask me a real question? Like, I'm just here as a friend." And all the other reporters were offended that my friend like dared ask a question. And I thought, you know, this is when, you know, the press has basically collapsed and become just like a pathetic shadow of its former self. When reporters are annoyed when another reporter asks a question. It tells you everything. Ugh.
Let's go to another student. Hello, welcome to Close Up at the Museum.
Hi, my name's Caroline Sanchez. I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana, and I go to St. Mary's Dominican High School. I was wondering if you think it's possible to even have a completely unbiased news program in the world today, and if so, would people watch it?
And if so, is that desirable?
It's totally impossible to be objective as a philosophical matter. And as a practical matter, it's impossible. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try, and it doesn't mean we shouldn't pretend. See, I'm for pretending. I'm for phoniness and falseness here, right? In the same way that I'm for manners, which are themselves phony. How are you this morning? I'm fine. How are you? We're both lying, right? And we both feel bad, but we pretend we feel good. Why do we do that? Because it makes things go easier, so we don't kill each other. So we don't, you know what I mean? Same with the pretense of objectivity. We ought to pretend in the press that we are objective. We ought to try as hard as we can to get to what is essentially an unattainable state.
Okay.
Because for a bunch of reasons. One, the harder you try, the more you pretend, the closer you'll get to it. And also, you want people to have confidence in your news, that you're not spinning it, that it's not just made up or thrown out there in the service of a political position.
Okay.
Thank you.
And no one agrees with me, by the way. That's a crackpot view, just in case you didn't know.
But we like the fact that you came here with strong opinions and you're sharing them with us.
They may be insane, but I mean them.
Our next poll question is, with the internet and 24-hour cable news, do you feel like you're more informed about the news than your parents when they were in high school? And so this is a simple yes or no. So those of you who feel that with all there is out there to graze from, you are more informed than your parents were at your age. And those who believe that, yeah, mom and dad, they had it all over us. And yeah, you got the 5 favorite sons and daughters of their families. Hello, welcome to Close Up at the Museum. Tell us your opinion on this matter.
Hi, my name is Mateo Schimpf. I'm from San Francisco, California. I go to St. Ignatius College Preparatory. And I actually think that we're less informed than our parents about political news because with TV being so easily accessible and readily available to us, I think in some sense it makes us oblivious and to some extent disinterested in what's happening in national and international affairs.
Familiarity breeding contempt. Let's bring the other opinion in before we talk about this. And we've got another student that feels the opposite on this one. Hello, again.
Hi again. So I think that there's more information available to our generation than there was for our parents. You know, I think that instead of having perhaps one newspaper or whatever, we've got like 8 plus a computer plus, you know, like 3 magazines and anything that you could ever, you know, imagine or wish for. But at the same time, I think that we have to sift through a lot more junk to get at like the nugget of truth that is in these, you know.
And some things. Have to have that time with the fashion magazines too, right? Tucker, take there's more information, there's no question. There's more platforms, there's no question. What is the link to whether we are, in fact, better informed as young people than our parents' generation?
Well, in my view, and this is like a very unpopular thing to say, but I believe it to be true, most people aren't interested in being informed and never will be. Most people are busy doing their own thing, living their own lives. They don't care, right? And that's okay. The beauty of the current state is that small percentage who really do care, who really are interested, have the opportunity to become better informed than anybody ever has been in previous generations. The one problem I see is that there's so much available information that we have trouble discerning important from unimportant. So everything kind of seems of the same importance. So like Paris Hilton getting a new poodle is kind of the same as Iran getting nukes. You know, it's just, it's all news. And we spend too little time kind of weeding out what is ephemeral and stupid and pointless from what is really significant.
And red wine is healthy, and red wine is not as healthy as grape juice, and oh, what we said about red wine last week is no longer operative.
Oh, well, that's, anytime you get the press talking about science or economics or anything with actual measures, you realize how dumb they are. You know, they're always, every week there's a study saying, this is good, no, this is bad. It's so, you know, when I worked at a newspaper, there was a sign in the newsroom saying, caution journalists working with numbers. Because there was this recognition that, like, we didn't know what the hell, you know what I mean? It's like, if we knew about numbers, we'd be making millions on Wall Street at the time. Not now.
Hello, welcome to Close Up at the Newseum.
Hi, my name is Josh Hickson. I go to the California Academy of Math and Science in Carson, California.
Okay, you know numbers.
Oh yeah, a little bit. And my question is concerning websites that I'm a big fan of, like dig.com and Reddit.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you think websites where the users get to choose what news is published on the page affects the way that people get news nowadays on the internet, and how much should the cable broadcast networks and newspapers pay attention to what people think is important?
They should totally ignore it, in my view. It's like, I mean that. I mean that. I think it's actually a bad thing to be able to choose what news you want, for two reasons. One, you're never surprised. And I think it's important to be pushed, you know what I mean, and to learn things you didn't expect to learn. You know, you're whipping through a newspaper and you think, well, I'm not interested in that. Whoa, actually, I kind of am. You know, surprise me. Don't reconfirm my pre-existing opinions. And two, your opinions themselves are never challenged. So if all I hear are people who agree with me, then I live in this tiny mental cocoon. If your opinions aren't changing every year, you have become dumb. That's my view. I mean, I have very strong opinions, as in case you hadn't noticed, but they change every year. Every year, like, someone will say something to me, I'll get in an argument, and I'll think to myself, wow, actually, you know, he's kind of right. You know, she makes a good point. And I evolve that way. And if you're not evolving, I mean, woo, I feel sorry for you. So I think it's good to be challenged in ways you didn't anticipate.
For the newspaper, for the press in general, there is that function of gatekeeper, which is kind of what we're talking about. And right now, they seem to be trying to follow that economic model that says if you're popular, you will survive, which is the primrose path.
It completely is. And this is like an ongoing debate, but it's like, in my view, if you give people exactly what they want, you will end up starving them to death. I have 4 children. I love them more than my own life. I'm not going to give them exactly what they want for dinner. It'll be, you know, Skittles and Welch's grape juice every night, and that's not... And I don't mean to compare consumers of news to children, but the truth is people don't have time to make those judgments about what's important and what's not. That's what we're paid to do. And now we're afraid to do it. I think, you know, you continue like this, we'll just have like televised executions on TV. That's all there will be.
No, there'll be infomercials.
Infomercials.
Because they get their money up front. Hello, welcome to Close Up at the Newseum.
Hi, my name is Veronica Randall. I'm from Oakland, California, and I attend Excel High School. My question is, do you think that newspaper posts will go out of business since the new generation tends to turn to the internet and television for news?
Well, as I said, if that's I mean, your question is the question that's sort of weighing on the shoulders of everybody who works in the news business, here at least, and certainly at your papers, the papers in the Bay Area are struggling, I know. If they go out of business, no, they're not going out of business. They're going to migrate to the web. They need to figure out how to make money on the web. The model of newspapers is very 19th century and outdated. Basically, a newspaper, daily newspaper is like a book. And they publish a brand new book every day and hire a guy to bring it to your house for 30 cents. That's not a winning business model. And so, yes, they will go out of business in their current form, but they had better stick around, and we're in deep trouble.
Let's go right away to another question. Hello.
Hi, my name is Emma Anderson, and I go to Abraham Lincoln High School in San Francisco, California. As someone who is involved in print journalism at my school and is very interested in journalism,
good for you.
Thanks. How do you think that we as journalists can overcome this need to increase readership and viewership, as you've talked about, you know, reporting those really stupid, meaningless stories in order to be more unbiased and objective?
Well, I mean, look. In order to be economically viable, to make money, you need to appeal to as many people as you can, by definition. And if we reach a point where people aren't buying real news in sufficient numbers to keep these places afloat, one of two things will happen. Either they'll go out of business, the New York Times which is the most comprehensive newspaper in the world, will cease to exist. Or, and I think this is more likely, papers like that, big serious papers, will become nonprofit organizations, like the museum, that exist in the public's best interests, in the public interest, to gather news. I think that's likely to happen. Do you think?
I hope so, and I was hoping, she's gone too far away now. I wanted to ask her what brought her interest into journalism. If we can get her back down here, if we can, because I think it's an important question to ask. It's not every student that comes into the studio that you know, really asks the question, this is about your future.
And where's Abraham Lincoln in the city?
It's in the Sunset area.
Yep.
Yeah. I guess what got me involved was I wanted to have a voice, not only a voice in my school, but I also wanted to represent, you know, what was going on in the school, and I wanted to be a part of what was going on, as well as to reflect what's the truth. And I guess just my natural interest in people and events.
That's great.
And what about, I mean, because we're sitting here in the museum where we got that First Amendment on the building, and then the premise is that an informed public does a better job of self-governance. And somewhere along the line, that has to bubble back up to the surface.
There's no way, no question about it. Uninformed populations elect bad leaders. I personally think the best reason to go into journalism is something that she alluded to, which is to learn about the world. It's a super interesting place, and as a journalist, you have the right, in fact, it's your job to go ask people questions and be nosy and find out how things work and what the rest of the world looks like, and they pay you to go places. It's like, it's an incredible gig.
Yeah, good. Hello, thanks for your patience.
Oh, no, thank you. My name is Julie Fancher. I'm from San Francisco, California, St. Ignatius College Prep. And in our government class, we watched a clip of Campbell Brown attacking one of John McCain's assistants, kind of. And do you believe that, one, that's fair to do to someone, and do you also believe that news anchors should be more opinionated or more objective?
Why do you watch that in class?
Our teacher showed us a clip of it, I think, to kind of
spark the discussion.
Yeah.
Well, it's okay for hosts of opinion shows to be opinionated. That's their job. That's what I've always done. And so I get to, you know, I go to bed every night, I don't have a single unexpressed thought, which is kind of nice. But I think hosts of news programs ought to shut up and keep their opinions to themselves. I mean, that's kind of the whole point. You're telling me what happened in the world. I'm supposed to believe you. If you're mouthing off and showing me that you're like an ideologue, I'm not going to believe you. I'm going to think that, you know, you're Keith Olbermann. Everything you say is, or Bill O'Reilly, or whatever. That, you know, though your views are being filtered through an ideological lens, and I'm not going to believe you. I really think they ought to be quiet and leave the bloviating to us, the trained professionals.
What a perfect place to end. Tucker Carlson, thank you so much for coming and sharing your opinions today. You've given us a lot of insight. Students, terrific questions. Give yourselves a hand for your participation. I want to remind our television audience that to send in a YouTube question or comment, go to youtube.com, search for Close-Up Challenge with Joe the Producer, February 5th. We welcome your feedback, both positive and negative. Please visit us at closeup.org or newseum.org. Our next program is on February 5th, 2009. That program will focus on political talk radio. We end Close-Up at the Newseum each week with a dedication to a fallen journalist. This week we honor Russian civil rights journalist Anastasia Barbarova. Anastasia worked for the Novaya Gazeta, a paper that specialized in human rights stories, is often critical of the Russian government. On January 19, 2009, she was with lawyer Stanislav Markelov when a masked gunman drove up and shot him in the head and then shot Anastasia, who later died of her injuries. She was 25 years old. Anastasia is the second Novaya Gazeta reporter to be gunned down, the other being Anna Politkovskaya.